Good evening, church. Oh man, I guess we're about 90 days now, getting close to the presidential election. Kamala, I got to learn how to say that now. I say Kamala, but she understands. It's not a name that I'm used to hearing. In fact, she's the first person I've ever heard with that name. I grew up with a young lady. Her family comes from Alabama. Her name was Corinda. I love little Corinda. And I'll tell you, I have never, ever met a woman named Corinda. So I said, if I ever have a daughter, I would name her after my friend Corinda. Today I'm going to surrender my Tuesday service to no other than Jesse, I believe it's Jesse L. Jackson, we don't have it here, but it's Reverend Jesse Jackson, speech to the NAACP Convention July 14th, 2004. That's why it's so important for the young people as we're getting ready, you are blockheads getting ready to go to school, right? And you need to read, spend some time reading. I gotta get on my great nephew and make sure he's doing it. Reverend Jesse Jackson speech to the NAACP Convention July 14, 2004, 20 years ago. Wow. Fulfilling America's Single Preposition by Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, because of a lot of the backlash that a lot of the black Americans take from the many other black communities, and particular Africans, the native, well, I won't call them native, but the Africans, the newly arrived Africans, where you hear so much on the internet about this, that, and the other, the difference between us. What I will do for my own sanity, I will, when I get to African American, I'm going to say Black American. All right? So that's just me. Some people want to say African American, I'll say Black American. What has made America appealing and respected around the world? Is it our 12 billion gross domestic product and general influence, the richest nation in history? That has great appeal, but it's not the essence of what makes America great. Is it our military might? After all, we're the only superpower in the world. Certainly the world is aware of our might, but our military is not so much respected as feared. Is it our diversity? The fact that people from many different nations, religions, and races live together in relative peace. That's important, but not our central idea. The Democratic Party platform in a strong, respected American section says, alone among nations. America was born in pursuit of an idea that a free people with diverse belief could govern themselves in peace. For more than a century, America has spared no effort to define and promote that idea around the world. Where there a kernel of truth in there, but using their words, just over a century ago, all Americans were not free. The Democratic Party held our grandparents in slavery. So that's selective memory and revisualization history. The single preposition that makes America great and appealing around the world was written by Thomas Jefferson on July 4th, 1776, in the Declaration of Independence. The rationale for the founding of our nation, that all men and women are created equal, even though Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder, did not practice or live up to his own words. It's his single proposition that America has sought to fulfill ever since. Church, in drafting the Constitution of 1787 and the state ratifying it in 1789, our founders tried to say that we can achieve such equality through, one, establishing a nation based on the rules of law, not man, and two, by dividing power among the executive, legislative, jurisdictional branches of government. But the Constitution did not achieve equality in its writings. It was an imperfect document that left out white men without property, women and Native Americans, and counted counted black Americans as 3/5 of a person. Thomas Jefferson also insisted on adding amendments to the new Constitution. So in 1791, the nation added 10 of them, known as the Bill of Rights, which included Jefferson's 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment led to a form of government called dual federalism, which had the state ceding limited power to federal government. But it is essentially gave the state equal power to the federal government unless the federal powers were specifically included in the Constitution. This was called state rights. So, in our founding documents, the federal government was structured as a separate and unequal system of government. We had 13 separate and unequal states that were given legal protection in the Constitution, 10th Amendment, with the impossible mandate to fulfill a single proposition, that all men and women were created equal and should be treated as such before the law. The word slavery never appeared in the Constitution. Slavery was protected by the 10th Amendment, state rights. The slave states didn't want the big federal government coming into their states telling them how to run their economy, which was built on slavery. Thus, we have black Americans treated as 3/5 in the Constitution, and the institution of slavery protected by state rights in the Bill of Rights. The Constitution, an imperfect document built on a separate and unequal legal foundation, nevertheless was given the mission to build a more perfect union around the single proposition that all men and women are created equal. Using the combination of Christianity belief that we are all God's children and Jefferson's declaration that we are all created equal, slaves resist and rebel against a system that practiced neither. As a result, the country faced the most extensive black insurrection in American history, planned by the Reverend Denmark BC for July 1822. The country also expected Nat Turner's rebellion in 18 experienced Nat Turner rebellion in 1831, and John Brown attempted to lead a slave rebellion in 1858. All became American, all because America was failing to fulfill its single proposition that all men and women are created equal and treated equal before the law. While blacks were discriminated against in the North in terms of the economy, the institution of slavery was in place in the South, while the North had an economic system of free labor. Even though the economic system North and South was set, the country was expanding westward, and the question was whether the West would be slaves or free. Abraham Lincoln Church was a political moderate who developed a core conviction of how to gradually end slavery. Lincoln's calculation was, in time, free northern and western states would outnumber southern slave states in Congress, and together they would vote to end slavery. Lincoln had many imperfections and compromised on the lots of the things, but on one central belief, we would not budge. He would not budge. He would not permit the expansion of slavery westward. When Lincoln was elected in 1860, rather than accept the gradualist position with respect to slavery, 11 southern states in the name of states' rights left the Union to protect the institution of slavery, and in 1861 provoked a civil war that cost 620,000 American lives, North and South. In 1865, Lincoln won the war and saved the Union. And all this was an attempt to save the Union in order fulfill the single proposition that all men and women are created equal. Lincoln Emancipation Proclamation, issued on January 1st, 1863, in the middle of the war, did not have the power to free the slaves. Only by adding the 13th Amendment to the Constitution in 1865 did Congress have the power to overcome the limitations of state rights, that is, a state's right to own slaves as permitted under the 10th Amendment. The 13th Amendment legally ended slavery, but it left two questions unanswered. There were 9 million in the South. 4 million of them were former slaves, the new freemen. The two unanswered questions related to the freedmen were: 1, how do we bring them into the economic mainstream? And 2, how do we politically enfranchise them? The answer to the first question was the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law and due process, added in 1868. The answer to the second question was the process added in 1868. The answer to the second question was the 15th Amendment, non-discrimination in voting on the basis of race. Added in 1870, remember, all of this is still an attempt by the country to fulfill the single proposition that all men and women are created equal. These 3 post-Civil War amendments were the basis of American First Reconstruction. Reconstruction was resisted by the Democratic Party, undermined by the Hyde-Haines Compromise in 1877. As Northern troops protecting the freedom were pulled out of the South, and a nail was driven into the hearts of the 14th Amendment when the Supreme Court narrowly interpreted it as separate but equal. And Percy versus Ferguson in 1896, bringing the legal legacy of Jim Crow into existence for 58 years. Jim Crow segregation lasted until the Warren Court overturned Percy with Brown in 1954. A new board interpretation of the 14th Amendment still attempting to fulfill the single preposition with the proceed of Brown, Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, Dr. Martin Luther King, and the broader civil rights community could now fight for legislation to repeal the 14th and 15th Amendment. Thus, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1968 Open Housing Act, affirmative action, economic set aside, and all similar efforts following Brown should be seen as an attempt to implement the 14th Amendment and to complete the unfinished work of the American Civil War, which was specifically designed to bring the former slaves into the economic mainstream. The 1965 Voting Rights Act, minority districts, motor voters, and the HAVA, the Help American Voter Act, and all similar efforts following Brown should be seen as an attempt to implement the 15th Amendment and complete the unfinished work of the American Civil War, which was specifically designed to politically enfranchise the former slaves. But this is the genius of the Black American experience and contribution to America. While all of these amendments were specifically designed for us, they were done in such a way as to benefit all Americans. Labor should be happy with the 13th Amendment because it outlawed slavery for everyone. The 14th Amendment provided equal protection and due process for all Americans. The 15th Amendment provides the basis for outlawing voter discrimination against anyone. Today, church, however, in many other areas of our lives, we are still stuck with the limitation of the 10th Amendment, state rights, the old slave amendment, the right to vote. There is legal debate within the civil rights community as to whether a combination of the 14th and 15th Amendment and current legal proceeds provide an adequate framework to guarantee the fundamental individual and equal rights to vote for every American citizen, or whether a new voting rights amendment should be added to the Constitution to overcome the limitation of the 10th Amendment and guarantee civil citizens the individual right to vote. Congress, Jesse Jackson Jr., has introduced House Joint Resolution 28, which the NAACP has already endorsed, which would add a voting rights amendment to the Constitution. However, there should be no debate among us that the number one agenda item for the civil rights community in the Kerry Edwards administration, beginning in 2005, should be strong, full federal rights, legislation, and guarantee every single American the fundamental right to vote, or a new voting rights constitutional amendment. We must insist on it because voting rights are protected of all other rights. We must say in the law, Florida, never again. The civil rights community must continue to protect our civil rights gains, strengthen civil rights laws and insist on civil rights endorsement, but we must now begin to fight for new human rights and fight to put them in the Constitution as the new amendment. We must not settle for federal legislation alone with respect to our rights. We must fight for new amendments to the Constitution. Education. While there is a debate about rights and the Constitution, there's no debate about education. Education is not mentioned in the Constitution. Therefore, education exists under the old slave amendment, the 10th Amendment. Education is a state right and subject to local control, and no high constitutional standard local control should remain. But every school must be mandated to meet a high constitutional standard. Currently, there are 50 states, 3,076 counties, 20,000 cities, 53 million children, and 93,000 schools, administrated by 15,000 school districts, all separate and unequal. How can children truly be given an equal educational opportunity under such a legal agreement? It can't. But remember, we are still a nation committed to a single preposition, that all men and women are created equal. Thus, in the area of education, we must fight for House Joint Resolution 29, which again, the NAACP is already on record as supporting. It provides for a public education of equal, high quality for every American. Health care. The word health care is not in the Constitution either. So health care is subject to the limitation of the old slave amendment as well. Health care too is a state right. There are 44 million Americans who have no health insurance, but only have access to the most expensive health care that given in an emergency room. Those without health care have no legal recourse because health care is not an American right guaranteed in the Constitution. We must fight for House Joint Resolution 30, the right to health care of equal high quality. Church, when we fight for human rights and constitutional amendments, we are fighting on solid moral and political ground. Human rights and constitutional amendments are, by definition, nonpartisan. They are not Republican or Democrat. Human rights and constitutional amendments are non-ideological. They are neither liberal nor conservative. Human rights and constitutional amendments have the advantage of being non-pragmatic. They don't tell you how to reach the right. If Republicans think medical saving accounts can achieve the right, fine. If Democrats believe single players can reach the right, fine. But if either fails to achieve the right for every American, they don't have to wait for the next president or the next Congress to promote them health care. They can take their right, go to federal court, and get their right to health care enforced finally. Human rights and constitutional rights are, by definition, not a special interest. They are for all Americans. Attorney General John Ashcroft believed the Second Amendment gives to individual Americans the right to keep and bear firearms. President George Bush and the Republican Congress wants to add an amendment to the Constitution defining marriage. They are voting on it in the Senate today. We should have those debates, but let's not limit the constitutional debate to gay rights and gun rights. Let's talk about voting rights, education rights, and healthcare rights. Let's talk about putting them in the Constitution too, and see which rights Americans most want in their Constitution. Indeed, it would make for an interesting political contrast and debate if President Bush was offering an anti-gay right amendment, discrimination against some Americans, and campaigning against Democrats on gun rights, while Senator Kerry was saying, I'm against your anti-gay rights amendment on principle. I believe in human rights for all human beings and in equal protection under the law for all Americans. I'm not against anyone limit gun rights. I just want to give gun owners a new constitutional right to education and health care of equal high quality, rights that would not exclude but include more Americans. Our challenge as a civil rights community is to continue the struggle to fulfill the American dream within the law and fulfill the single proposition that all men and women are created equal. Thank you, and God bless you. That was Jesse Jackson, delivered his speech July 14, 2004 at the NAACP Convention. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Here's another, since I'm on Jesse, here's another message from Jesse Jackson. Mount Union College. Reverend Jesse Jackson presented the Mount Union College Scholar Literature Monday, September 23rd, 1991. Jackson, an ordained Baptist minister, advocated for human rights and high-profile proponents for the importance of educating the young, spoke on diversity and social justice. Jackson is currently the president of the National Rainbow Coalition in Court, a national organization headquartered in Washington, D.C. He has twice been a presidential candidate, in 1984 and in 1988. From 1971 to 1983, Jackson was national president of Operation PUSH, People United to Serve Humanity, a Chicago-based human rights organization concerned with economic development, moral and academic excellence in education, healthcare, housing, justice, and international peace issues. He is the author of The Straight from the Heart, a book of 36 public speeches, sermons, eulogies, and interviews, and Keep Hope Alive, the 1988 Jackson campaign, a collection of speeches, issues, briefs, and preposition papers from the 1988 campaign. Jackson's message in Keep Hope Alive is to stop drugs from coming in and jobs from going out. Invest in America, invest in our children, fight against crime, against economic violence, and for common justice. Born in Greenville, South Carolina, Jesse Jackson attended the University of Illinois on a football scholarship for 1 year, then transferred to North Carolina A&T State University, where he was active in sports and student government. He graduated with a BA degree in sociology in 1963 and attended the Chicago Theological Seminary for 2.5 years before joining Dr. Martin Luther King in 1965 on the Voting Rights March in Selma, Alabama. Thank you again. Thank you again. And just for a note, for the church and for the people out there, my friends and family, that I'm going to continue as we march on towards November. I will continue to bring you brief updates of the Black American experience, our history, our triumphs, our victories. May God bless us, and may God bless America. Good night.